Alright, so my lesson is going to be on direct commands, and I'm Nick Brosey. So there are two different kind of commands that you'll run into in Latin. First one is direct, and the second one is indirect. So a direct command, as you can see in the example here, would be get out of bed. And so in the case of a direct command, you would be telling someone to directly do something to their face. Whereas in an indirect command announces what was commanded. And so if you look at the example, it's I asked my brother to get out of bed. So instead of directly saying it to his face, this indirect command makes it seem as if I'm talking to someone else about what had happened. So there's two different clauses within an indirect command. And so the first one is the main clause, which includes the command verb, and then there's the dependent clause, which is what was commanded to be done. So as you can see, example down here, I put the main clause in red and then the dependent clause in just regular black. And so when you look at a indirect command, you want to identify these two different parts of it. And so the first one almost always has the command verb, which is in this case ordered, and then dependent clause is usually introduced by to, which in Latin is ut, or not, which in Latin is ne. So when it comes to how to form an indirect command in Latin, you first want to think about the main command verb, which there are many, but I picked out three of the most common, which are rogo, ask, imperio, order, mando, command. After you figured out the main command verb, you want to think about the dependent clause, which will be the second part of the sentence. And so the dependent clause is introduced, as I had said before, by ut or ne, which is to or not. And the last piece, which I hadn't got to yet, is the present or imperfect subjunctive. And so when I say that, I'm talking about the verb. And so in indirect commands, you always have to end in the subjunctive. So in the examples, we want to use what we learned before in the previous slides to kind of break this down. And so first thing we want to look for is the main command verb, which in this sentence is here. And next, the second thing that we do is try to find the dependent clause, which is introduced by ut or ne. In this case, it's ne. So this is the dependent clause, and this is the main clause. And lastly, you want to think about the subjunctive verb. And so here, this is our example. And so if you want to figure this out on yourself, you can pause the video and try to do it. But I'm about to reveal the answer. So here it is. The doctor told us not to go in. And so when we go on to the second example, pretty much do the same thing that you did in the first one, which is identify the main verb, then the introducing word to the dependent clause, which in this case is ut instead of ne. And lastly, you want to think about that subjunctive verb, which in this case is here. And so it translates to, I advise you to obey the laws. And so that is the end of the indirect command lesson thing, I guess. Thanks for listening.